Okay, this is where I left off with the forehead of my creature, right? And if I put the eyes on, you can see how that kind of obliterates all of that red panda work. So I think I want to find some different eyes. Or I can just really quickly see how these things could work. So I could take that red panda layer, and I see the chameleon eye there. I could actually steal that chameleon eye. I think it's this layer. Yep. And internally composite it here. Take this big lump, because it's pretty cool. I love all this color and sharp defined texture. I can hit Command J, duplicate it, and then move that eye to where I think that would make a little bit more sense. The problem is these eyes are not cute. They're looking in different directions. They're kind of off, but it gives me a structure. Whoops, I want Control T, not Command T. It gives me a structure on which to place a more sympathetic looking eye, because I want something that looks kind of cute. So I've got these cat eyes, and I can cut those out, but my problem is how grainy they are. And I think what happened was that they were shot in a low light, and the digital camera's ISO was a little too high, and so you got all that grainy noise. Because cats don't like it when it's too bright out. So I'll copy these onto two separate layers just in case, but then I'm going to find some new reference. And once you start building, you might see that you just want a slightly different quality or aspect to your reference. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yes, your sketch can definitely change, and most likely will, based on what you're able to find. So those eyes kind of work, but I want to find something a little bit stronger. So I'm going to go back to Pixabay. And I was thinking kitten eyes. Thought they'd be cute. But cat eyes have so many different kind of reflections to them. They can actually be tricky. So I might also look at different animals as well. And I don't want them facing straight forward. I want them at that 3/4 angle, and preferably looking down a little bit. Oh, these Siamese eyes are nice. So I'm opening these links in new tabs. And there are 38 pages of kitten eyes. You know, cats in the internet. There's no shortage. Just how much patience do you have looking through it? I'm signed in, so I can get this at 6,000 by 4,000 pixels. I think that's my favorite. Those are a little heavy shadowed, and it looks like a little bit of graininess too. That's a little out of focus. So I'm going to go with this one. They come into downloads. I want to be sure to save that into my folder, into my references, right? So that if I accidentally delete it or lose something, call it kitten eyes, then I have that smart object that I can always bring back in. I'm going to move it up. And look how big that is. So it is the right angle. I just have to reverse it. So I just have to Control T, right click, flip horizontal. And then I just need to bring it in. And you know, this might work in a few different ways. As more than just the eyes. We'll see, with like this fur behind. So if I move that lower, turn on some of these other elements, move it down behind them. Yeah, this might help to kind of map things too. Before I rasterize it, I want to get it like the right place and the right size. So that's working pretty well. Shift that over a bit. And then I'm going to Control T and shrink this cat head. So those eyes are kind of big and prominent in the right place. And where I think some of this might be useful is in the transition to the neck. So I'm going to steal from the cat. I'm not going to take its ears, but I'm going to take some of this fur that transitions into the neck. I like this kind of white plume under it. And its mouth. I don't think I'm going to use all the whiskers, but we'll see. And then just grab that, duplicate it, delete the smart object it comes from. Because there's not a whole lot more that's useful about it besides that head. Okay, now we want the red panda, get that placement so it works with those eyes. Maybe I grow those eyes a little bit so I can force that red panda face up. So let's see, my eye layer is right there. And maybe I actually Control T and I warp it so I can just enlarge this eye that's closer to us. Looks a little bit more intense that way. Okay. So now it's about transitioning all these elements together. And we know how to do that. I'm going to save. And we're going to start. I'm going to play with the levels of the red panda nose. So I'm going to go to Image Adjustment Levels. Zoom out a little bit. Do I want to brighten? Yeah, I want to brighten the midtones just a little bit. Do I want to limit the shadows at all? Just the tiniest bit. I think the highlights are good. Now, color balance, this always makes a pretty big difference. In the shadows, I'm going to push the cyan and the blue, especially with those blue eyes. But in the midtones, I'm going to try to warm it up a little. And especially in the highlights, going to try to give it more yellow. There's a lot of that in the eyes. Okay. Now in hue saturation, let's just swing for the fences. I can push it a little bit more towards the yellows. Nice. And now with the eye layer, which is doing a lot, image, adjustment levels, let's really make sure we optimize that histogram. That the black of those pupils is really black, and then play with the midtones. Sometimes you just don't know till you see it. I think I want to brighten those midtones a bit. So those eyes really have some prominence. And then I want to go to color balance, and I want to play with the highlights, shift them a little bit more towards red. Just a little. Just a smidge towards yellow. No, I'll keep it towards blue because I want those eyes to have those highlights. Less green, maybe a tiny bit more magenta. Shadows, more cyan. And more red. And then midtones. A little bit more red, tiny bit more yellow. Okay. Now with this nose, it shows me where I want to dodge, where I want it to catch light. So I'm going to click on the nose, and then I'm going to use the dodge tool. Nice and big, midtones, exposure of 20 or less, soft edged. And I'm going to start brightening just the top of that nose. Because I'm on midtones, I'm not worried about going to bright white. But I just brightened it quite a bit. Now I can go to the eyes, and I can brighten maybe in the eye itself, because there's a lot of shadow there. And then maybe I can burn just the pupil. So it has a lot of intensity. Maybe around the edges of the eye too. And then I can burn a little bit more generally, a slightly bigger brush, the midtones that are going to overlap the rest of the fur. Now you can see it's adding a lot of color there as I do that. I can try that on the panda nose too. Just burning the edges. And if I want to play with the color, I can use sponge. In this case, I might use it to try to saturate a little bit into that white so I don't lose so much color. But it's getting a little green and weird when I saturate that way. So let me go to desaturate. Take that back down a bit. But it's giving me that dimension I want. And then if I do it to the eyes, desaturate some of that color. Now I can go in with my eraser at 100% opacity, soft edged, fairly large, be on the panda nose. Every time I click it just to select it, it moves it a tiny bit. It's annoying. And then erase and start getting rid of that hard edge distinction between the two. Once I've gotten rid of that hard edge, then I can go in with a lower opacity eraser and really start blending. But I have to get rid of that crisp edge first. And now I'll take it down to like 40% opacity. And start letting the two layers blend into each other. Especially with a really big brush, I can use the ghost of it to start blending them. And you can see how it will start to mix their colors and their lighting in a pretty believable way. As long as I don't overdo it. It's easy to overdo it. That's what Command Z is for.